Welcome to the Nerd Review. This is the show where we talk about movies, TV shows, video games, books, and comic books. This is Season 2, Episode 2. Today we're going to do more of an open concept episode. We're talking about nostalgia. I'm a huge nostalgic person. I often think about my childhood and all the amazing things that I got to do growing up and how amazing it was growing up during the late 90s and early 2000s. So let's jump into Episode 2, the Nerd Review of nostalgia. So let's start with the definition of nostalgia. A sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with a happy personal association. Now, when I read that, I think of all the amazing memories I have of my childhood, going to movies with the family, with friends, going to the movie store, Blockbuster, or if you grew up in Quebec, you had Super Club Videotron, whatever local video store, that smell of popcorn and plastic in those somewhat identically designed stores. It was like, it didn't matter which Videotron or Blockbuster you went into, they were going to be set up the same way. And just browsing the movies and walking up and down these aisles of just amazing content was this physical world of movies was, there's some of my best memories running up and down the aisles and trying to decide on one or two or three movies, and maybe you had one of those little coupons that if you went to Videotron, they had for like $1 or 25 cents you could put in. I don't remember how much it cost, but you would put a little coin in one of those like candy machines, and you would crank it, and a little ball would come out, and inside would be like a coupon, and it would say like, you can get 3 movies for 3 days, or 1 video game for 2 days. And we would try to collect these throughout the year, and then in the summer, we would just we didn't need to have money or constantly ask for money to go rent movies. We just had these piles of coupons, and that was again, just it makes me happy just talking about it. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, so that's the era that I'm most nostalgic for, probably from like 99 to all the way through the early 2000s up to like 2006 when I would start high school, and then it's like just like I'm an angsty teenager, so but even then there's nostalgia about that. I mean, that's the first iPhone comes out when I'm just around grade 7, grade 8, and it just completely changes high school on its head overnight. Smartphones hit the scene, and it was like the Wild West. There was no regulations. We didn't know what Facebook was going to do to high school and texting and all these things. And in hindsight, it's crazy to think about how much would change and how fast. When I look at when I think about my earliest memories, around 4 or 5 years old, and I'm playing with all the things around the house, and there was an old cell phone in the drawer, and it's the StarTAC, the Motorola StarTAC flip phone with that iconic battery on the top, and I would pop the battery in and out, and I was playing with it, pretend, make believe, and it was my walkie-talkie, and I would run around the house playing with that. And within just a handful of years, we would have so many different cell phones, and by the time from 4 to 5 to 14, in 10 years, and I mean, through the eyes of a child, 10 years doesn't really seem as long as it sounds, and all of a sudden we have iPod Touch, iPhone, in my same lifespan. Like by the end of elementary school, we have MP3 players became much more prolific. The first, I looked it up, and like I thought they were introduced much later, but the first one is introduced in 1997, but it wouldn't be until a few years later that the first iPod is introduced, and then very quickly after that you have like the iPod Touch and the iPod Nano and all these different devices. And I mean, that's just one example of how things changed so rapidly from, again, as a child, it seems like it's one day to the next, but obviously there was a few years in between. But you just like throw that as one piece of the puzzle, and then let's take it to video games. One of my favorite things and some of my favorite memories growing up was around video games, and I'm very lucky that I had a lot of young siblings in the family. My uncles weren't that much older than me, and I, got to watch, just, sit there and watch as a young kid. I was just watching other people play video games, and apparently this is something that's actually very common. People have wrote about this online, that their first memories of video games are kind of just sitting there watching one of their older siblings or their older relatives playing video games, and it allowed them to just watch and become aware of video games. And then you remember when you were handed your first controller and they were like, you want to play with me? And it was just like, that's awesome, like, oh yeah, I get to play. And I was lucky enough that some of these consoles were like the Sega Game Gear or a ColecoVision. My grandfather had a ColecoVision in like mint condition, and I remember those paddles with the little side-to-side dongle on it, and those were just amazing experiences. And then my brother gets the N64 for his birthday or Christmas, I don't remember, one year, and now we have like all these amazing games to play. Pokemon Stadium still to this day reverberates with me as one of the best games I've ever played. That was just like, and like the music is so iconic. My brother still has that N64 and all our controllers, and like just seeing it is, and it still works. Like that's one thing I'll mention, it still freaking works. Things were made to last back then. That's not just something that people say, like it's true. So like we still have that N64, and eventually he would get a PlayStation and then an Xbox, and then an Xbox 360, a PlayStation 3. We have the latest consoles now. It's amazing to see like how many iterations of these consoles we've gone through. And I mean, same thing for Game Boy. I remember vividly the first console that I saved up my money for. I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, saved up all my allowances. So we're like talking like 2002, by the way, when I'm 8 years old, and I wanted the Game Boy Color with Pokemon Blue. So like that was huge for me, and I got it, and I still have it. It was the turquoise Game Boy Color. Still have it. It's in mint condition. It's in a freaking display case in my house. It's beautiful. I still have the back cover for the batteries. Just gonna put that out there. Like, I kept this thing in prime condition, and I mean, just within a few years, I had like I would play with the Game Boy Color for years, and it would be my favorite possession. And then the Game Boy Advance came out, and then the Game Boy SP, and then the DS, and then the 3DS, and that's just handhelds. I also had a PSP at some point thrown in there. I just like put down all my Game Boys and was like, oh yeah, PSP micro discs. those were amazing. I had Terminator 2 the movie, and I could watch that on vacation on this little screen. You had to put your sweater over your head because you couldn't see it during the day, but like that was how I watched movies. I mean, the screen size is basically the same as my phone now when you think about it. And like now we have the Switch, and there's so many things that I look back on and I think like, oh my god, that was so much fun, and the innocence and just the pure enjoyment of being in the moment and having great entertainment, great technology, great friends, going on sleepovers, and just like all these things that like they stick with you years and years later, like to the point of you want to do a podcast episode about it like I am right now. So that's just one of the examples. Another one, movie theater birthdays. I think they're still done. I don't know how popular they are. I see the room at the theater when I go, and I remember that. I got to see a couple movies, and like you invite like 10-15 friends, and you have this room in the movie theater that's all yours, and there's like a before and after party, and then like you literally go upstairs in the theater, and all 10 of your friends and all the parents sit there, and you get to watch a movie together. Like that was the viewing party before Netflix. It was in person, and it was absolutely incredible, and I vividly remember that. And like shout out to the parents who put that together, like mom, dad, and all that. That was probably a logistic nightmare, considering that this was like pre-Facebook and instant messaging, and you had to like call people and send out cards and all this stuff that I had no idea was happening in the world. And that's part of the magic and the pleasure and the blessing of a good childhood, where you're able to focus on just the craziness of being a child, on all the TV series and the Bionicles and the Beyblades and the Yu-Gi-Oh of it. I'm just watching TV and going from point A to point B, and the world is happening on a higher level, basically. Like I'm so low to the ground physically and reality wise that everything is going over my head, and it's amazing to think back and think like at what age you started realizing the rest of the world. And I remember having the thought once, why can we only see from our eyes? Like, why can't we see from other people's perspectives? And that, like, it's a thing. That's a thing that kids think about. Like, why can't I see out of the eyes of other people? Like, it's just, and I just remember asking that one day, and I don't remember what the answer was. It was probably just like, well, because your eyes. Like, how do you answer that question? Why can't I see out of somebody else's eyes? And I mean, I guess we can nowadays. You have, video calls, and you can put the camera forward, and you can show somebody what you're seeing. We have those POV cameras, GoPros, and maybe that was the answer to somebody else's question that had, the same wonderments that I had as a kid. They wanted to see life through somebody else's eyes, and that's where we get like VR and GoPros, and that's the weird tangents that my brain goes on from nostalgia to, why can't we see through other people's eyes? And so from there, like, I think about, all the books and movies that I got to grow up with too. I'll bring it back to like Harry Potter. I was pretty young for when the book started coming out in '98. I was like 4, so I wasn't really reading the books yet, but the movies started coming out, and that was my first introduction to the Harry Potter world. And I didn't know it then, but it's a Chris Columbus movie, and from his work on the Goonies and everything that I said in the Harry Potter episode, he made that movie so welcoming and so magical for the kids everywhere, all around the world, that's exactly what it felt like. You watch that movie, you feel like you're being welcomed into Hogwarts, and it's absolutely amazing to this day. And every time I throw it on, I remember being a kid and seeing it in theaters, and then getting it on, DVD or VHS or whatever it was, and getting to just watch it over and over again. And you couldn't stream it, you couldn't download it. It was just like you saw it in the theater, and then you waited for it, and you talked about it with your friends, and you picked up little, sticks, and you ran around, and you didn't have all the movies yet. It's like waiting for something amazing to come out, like anything new, right? But like when it's something so big, when you think like Harry Potter, and then just think like that you've only been able to see one, like getting to grow up with Star Wars, not only was Harry Potter happening, but yeah, I got to grow up during the prequels too. So I mean, you can argue all day about their merits or whether or not they're that good, but when you're like 6 or 7 years old, and I was very lucky that I had some pretty nerdy people in my family, so I got to see the original saga. And I remember watching the original saga and thinking it's great, space lasers and clone troopers and all these amazing effects in these movies, and lightsabers and all that stuff is just amazing for a kid. And then it's like, oh, there's a new one coming out, and everybody's super excited. So I'm just excited because they're excited. And then you just look back, and now, like after the first 3 came out, the prequels came out, by the time the third one came out, I'm not a kid anymore. Well, I'm a kid, but I wasn't 6 or 7. I was like, 13, 12 or 13. I'm not exactly sure on the timeline, but if the third one comes out in somewhere in the 2000s, I'm almost done elementary school, and now I'm a Star Wars fan, and you have like Star Wars bed sheets and Star Wars action figures, and it's just like a generational thing too when you think about it. Like, my parents and my older relatives got to grow up with the original saga, and they had all the action figures for the original saga, and then they get to kind of relive it through me too, because now I have all the action figures for the new series, and I'm playing with the action figures of the Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Ewan McGregor Obi-Wan Kenobi, not the old guy. Like, it's just it's kind of crazy when you think about it like that. It's this intergenerational spanning nostalgic amazingness that I think that's the magic of the world. And that's like one of the, if people out question like, does magic exist, and like maybe not the magic of Harry Potter, but there is different kinds of magic in this world, and that's one of them, this magical innocence and amazing childhood innocence that we are able to give and receive in that sense. I was able to have this magical experiences of going to see all these movies and having these action figures and just enjoying that, and it was really amazing. And to the point of like, I remember Transformers. We'll talk about, I did the Transformers episode for season, the season premiere of season 2, and Transformers toys were probably such a huge part of my childhood. They were so cool. You could transform them. They were small. Some of them were really big, and you could hide one in your pocket and then like bust it out at recess. Same thing with Beyblades. I probably most kids who were born around this time remember bringing. It's the age-old story. You would bring a toy to school, and it would be really popular. Everyone would play with it, and then it would cause a fight, and they would ban the toy, and you wouldn't be allowed to bring it anymore. And then 2 months later, there would be a new toy. Everyone would bring it, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, Beyblades, whatever it was, and it would be super popular, and you'd play it at recess, and then it would cause a fight, and it would get banned, and it was just like a rinse and repeat kind of thing. And I mean, your Pokemon cards, your Yu-Gi-Oh cards, your Beyblades, your Bionicles, Digivices. Oh my god, Digivices. Like the reincarnation of Tamagotchis, but in the form of the Digivices from Digimon. And like it was hilarious. You would go out on recess, and then I'll admit it, I was probably involved in a few of the fights that led to it being banned. It was only a matter of time between a bunch of kids with expensive cards and electronics, and then like you're gonna get pushed, or you're gonna get bumped into, and it's gonna fall, or your card's gonna get grabbed, or something always inevitably happened, and it led to a fight, and then probably parents got involved, and we paid for this, or this happened, and then the school is caught in the middle, and they're just like, all right, well, we're gonna put that on the no list, and you're not allowed to bring it in. And I do distinctly remember too, in second grade, one of my action figures got confiscated by this super annoying teacher. Nobody liked her. It's the second grade. Nobody liked any teacher. And I remember sneaking into the classroom and going through her drawer and retrieving my action figure and busting him out and taking him home with me. And I don't know if anybody else managed to get it, but I remember losing a few things to teachers. Like they just never gave it back. And I think back, like, that's pretty messed up. They just like took your property and never returned it. I don't know why we didn't make a bigger deal about that. Like tell our parents, like, hey, like the teacher stole my action figure and they're not giving it back. That was kind of, it's just like, I'm just thinking about that now and it's like, wow, that is pretty messed up. Some of the other things that I remember and am maybe not nostalgic, well, yeah, nostalgic about for sure. Just being on the ground floor of different things that started during my, childhood or, adolescence at that point. The MCU, the first, when Iron Man comes out in 2008, I can boast about having seen every single MCU movie in theaters. If that makes me a huge nerd or geek or whatever you want to call it, like, I don't care. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. There was always Thor 2. That's a bad movie. I can admit it. But it's something that I've enjoyed since I was in, 7th, 8th grade. And I go with friends, I go with family, I go with my girlfriend, and they're just, it's fun superhero antics. And I remember, 2001, 2002, the first Spider-Man movie comes out, Tobey Maguire. I'm in second grade, and, all the action figures and everybody's talking Spider-Man now, and they're wearing the t-shirts, and the second movie comes out and the third movie comes out, and by the time the third movie comes out again, it's like 2006, 2007, I believe, and now I'm in high school and we're still talking about it, and it just becomes so much fun to talk about superheroes with your friends. And that was around the time that like they just hit mainstream, if everybody wants to talk about it that way. That's when nerds took over the world, and if you look at it in retrospect like that, and everything became nerd culture and Comic-Con, and everything was just celebrated for being fun and inclusive, and it led to like, I love my D&D group. Shout out to the D&D guys, if you're listening, which I hope you are. It's just about having fun, and that's what I think a big part of nostalgia is for me. It's remembering past fun and remembering the people that I had past fun with, because not all of them are, still super close, and I don't talk to all of them, but I have those memories, and I have, maybe we were watching Iron Man 1, or we were watching something else, we were playing a video game, we were, doing something that was, super popular at one time, and it's just amazing to think that like how fast that changed. Like 1 minute it's the coolest, most popular thing, and then you think, a few years goes by and you're like, oh my God, you remember we were doing that? Like, before the quality of cameras improved on smartphones, we were using camcorders. I remember using the little like handheld camera device for like recording my friends and stuff. It wasn't my phone. Like, I have the videos from my phone. They were absolutely terrible. The quality was garbage. Like, I have some like night videos and all you can hear is talking because there's no video. It's just like shades of black pixels, and it's quite fun to go down memory lane and rejoice in all those good times. And some, maybe they were a bad time or they were a bit tumultuous, and heartbreak and your first girlfriend or your first boyfriend and all the things that come with adolescence and growing up. But you look back and hopefully it was a good time in that regard, and especially when it comes to like the media of it all, like the everything that we talk about here on the Nerd Review. It kind of like brings you back in time. There are the TV series and the movies and the music and all of that stuff you watch. It's like one of the if we go back to the magic analogy, it's one of the forms of time travel that we actually have access to. You could sit down and watch a movie from when you were 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever have you, and it's like you're sitting on that sofa and you're a tiny little human with your family and maybe your mom or your dad, and you're just like, you're totally blissfully unaware of everything that's happening, and all that exists to you is that room and that moment and that movie. And then it just becomes like, one of those prime core memories. And I think it's wonderful. So like, that's nostalgia. This is a random episode, and it's been just a rambling episode of things that I remember and enjoy. Action figures, Arthur. I have behind me here a haul of VHS that I got from a local used everything store. It's like a card store / collectibles / anything you can think of, and they have a pretty good selection of VHS tapes being brought in on the regular. And I have here the latest haul right next to me. I got like 4 Arthur tapes, like Arthur and the Chicken Pox and Arthur's New Puppy. I got Bugs Life, Free Willy 1 and 2, Scooby-Doo and the Ghouls School. I actually got the Goonies, which is pretty cool. We were just talking about Chris Columbus, and it's in that original blister pack. I actually have my VHS player. VCR is actually what the name of that is. I still have my VCR, and it's hooked up to my main TV, and I watch these, like 720p, not even quality, and it's just, it's the sound, it's the sound of the VCR booting up and the tape spinning around that just, it brings you back, and it's like time travel, and it's easy to see why that would be so enticing to go back to, what they always say, more innocent times when you were like, when you were a kid. It was fun. And I could go on all day about all of these random things, but that's going to be the end of today's short rambling episode. I'm working on a much bigger episode for episode 3. It has been a busy new year for 2023 for me. I've just had multiple birthdays and parties and all sorts of fun things happening, but I am still working on a pretty big episode for episode 3. I put out a teaser for it. The timeline is a bit skewed, so I wanted to put out something. I decided it would be this weird rambling episode on nostalgia. So I hope you laughed. I hope you made you think about your childhood. I hope it was good. I hope it was as good as this episode was, if it wasn't a bit random and not too rambly. But without further ado, that will be the end of today's episode. I will be back for episode 3. If you saw the teaser, it will be on Beetleborgs. I am putting a lot of work and research into these new episodes, so there might be some of these random little filler episodes in between, because it's a lot of work doing all the research and stuff. So it's been great, and season 2 is off to a great start. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed past episodes, and I appreciate everyone who listens. So without further ado, this has been season 2, episode 2, rambling episode on nostalgia. This has been the Nerd, signing off.